Going live. We are live. Yes, we are. All right. Hey, we got audio. And hey, everybody in YouTube. We are in YouTube land. This is Jackie Luqman.
And I'm at this Shahid Luqman.
And welcome to Live and Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation.
The most dangerous show on social media.
So we are streaming live directly from YouTube, as I said we were going to do a few weeks ago. We're still getting things set up, so we don't have an intro, so to speak. So I'm just going to give you guys some time to hop on. I'm going to share this link from our Facebook page onto a bunch of other platforms so people can hop on. This week, hon?
Well, we got a few things we wanted to talk about. Let me first start off by saying, we've been, I don't think we've really done a major live stream since probably the so-called white supremacist rally. That was the live stream that we did.
We haven't.
And so, I mean, we took a little hiatus, but now it's in September 1st to be exact. And so we're just like the networks, when they premiere fall shows. I know we're not in fall yet, but September 1st, we're starting off fresh. We're coming out. We rested up a little bit. Yeah. And so now we're ready to tackle some stuff, and we're going to be who we are, politically incorrect as ever, but correct as we see it.
Exactly.
All right. So the first big thing is everyone's talking about the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, who had her funeral, I believe, Thursday. I'm sorry. Was it Thursday?
Well, actually, the public funeral was yesterday. And there were a bunch of viewings and stuff throughout, like over 5 days. So yesterday was the formal funeral for Aretha Franklin at Grace Baptist Church in Detroit. 6-hour funeral, 6 hours. Not even mad at the length because look, it's Aretha Franklin. We're talking about.
I mean, she didn't mind.
Yeah. And we are talking about 60 years, 6 decades of talent, of treasure, of life lived, and
but at the same time, Senator John McCain, who also had a funeral, the same time, I believe, same day. There was a lot of there was a lot of talk about Barack Obama, who was invited to speak to eulogize McCain. That was pre-planned,
but he was also invited to come to Aretha's
So
funeral.
he chose to eulogize McCain.
Isn't that emblematic of his whole presidency?
Well, exactly. We're going to talk about that. But again, he sent his his side boy Eric Holder, to I guess fill in, because I don't think Eric Holder was actually invited. He was a fill-in for Obama.
You think so?
I think so. Yeah, I think he was filling for Obama. But if I'm wrong, if somebody out there knows the real deal, what's going on, then please, correct me if Eric Holder was invited. I think he was just a fill-in for Obama, and But all of this talk, and this what gets me. All of this talk, and we're going to get into some of the problems that we had with the funeral. But all this talk about Aretha planned this. This is what I keep hearing. Aretha planned this, right? They say, well, Aretha Franklin planned this, and the funeral was by invitation only. And I someone on it amazes me, Jackie, the amount of ignorance, and I say that not trying to insult anyone. But the amount of ignorance that people have, and they comment anyway. Like when someone's post, someone said, "Oh, well, you guys are making a big deal about Obama not coming. Well, what about all the other entertainers that didn't show up? No one's saying anything about that." Well, it was by invitation only.
Right.
So that would explain why you didn't see a lot of other entertainers there.
Precisely.
And those who were there, and this is the reason why I'm kind of skeptical about Aretha having, this hands-on thing with her own funeral. And number one, and I mentioned this to you earlier, that I feel that when people are facing their own mortality, Aretha Franklin, I don't know her. I didn't know her. So I can't speak on her character, whether she was that narcissistic or whatever. There have been rumors about her diva type behavior with people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This is what people say. I didn't know her personally, but the reason why I'm skeptical of it, Jackie, is because I'm looking at the people who were invited.
Mm-hmm.
Ariana Grande, I think her name is,
Ariana Grande,
Grande, right? And we're going to definitely talk about that. But she did Natural Woman,
mm-hmm.
and like I told you, people took, people criticized her performance of it. But then, like I told you, I kind of give her a pass because Stevie Wonder once said that anytime, and this was something that people in the industry used to say about Aretha. They used to say, once she takes a song,
mm-hmm.
you never get it back.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not going to really hold Ariana Grande's feet to the fire for not, for her vocal performance.
Right.
But I will say this. I will say that Ariana Grande, in my opinion, was invited there because she had made the headlines not too long ago mm-hmm. when she did a concert in London. And her concert was somebody blew themselves up, or either they blew themselves up, but it was some kind of terrorist attack at mm-hmm. one of her concerts, and some people died. Oh. I feel personally that that may have gotten her that spot.
Well, people said that the reason she was invited and the reason Faith Hill was invited was because Aretha liked their voices and felt like they had to have. I mean, we will never know, but their performances really weren't even the issue. Although I will say, I really do have to say, just for once, I just wish Black people would stop being afraid to have events with only Black people at them. I just really feel like and we're going to get into some of the reasons that was such a problem as far as politics is concerned, but
shameless promotion.
But I mean, I listen. If she had a hand in inviting the people who perform, mm-hmm. okay, fine. Some of those folks,
Well, I mean, this is what I think. I mean, and I felt this way. I mentioned this to you this morning when we were preparing for the show, that I felt that why not Lauryn Hill? Why wasn't she invited? Lauryn Hill produced one of Aretha's last hits, which was "A Rose Is a Rose."
Exactly.
And I mean, it was last hit. Someone with much better vocal ability and performance acumen, I guess you could say, mm-hmm. than Ariana Grande. Somebody who's more seasoned.
Right.
Now it could be that maybe Lauryn Hill was in a mental institution because she's
been having some issues.
She has been having some issues. She probably wasn't available. You know what I mean?
I mean, she's preparing for a tour. Okay. But still, this is all conjecture from fans, right? From two middle-aged fans of Aretha Franklin who grew up on her music, who grew up on her life, really. Right, yeah. So we're just like,
and we also seen Aretha fat, and we've seen Aretha skinny.
Yeah,
and,
a couple of times.
So I mean, we lived through that, and this is no disrespect to Aretha. Exactly. We adore her, but what we're saying is, I use those examples to say that at being middle-aged people, as you say, mm-hmm. that Aretha has been a very big part of our life, growing up. So we've seen her in different stages. We were around when she had bad relationships with men, marriage with Glenn Turman. Mm-hmm. If y'all don't know who Glenn Turman is, he was preaching in Cooley High,
right?
And he was also in Different World. He was the colonel, the ROC,
right?
Yeah, that guy.
He was an abusive bastard.
He was abusive.
Let's just be honest.
Right.
Let's just be honest. He was an abusive bastard. Put that woman in the hospital. She wrote, as a matter of fact, WPFW, our favorite radio station, played a song that she wrote that is rumored to have been about him. And I think the name of the song was Honey Why. And I was driving when they were playing it, and it hurt it hurt so much to hear her sing, I've done everything for you. There isn't anything I haven't done for you. And I don't understand why you treat me so bad. Wow. I mean, so the woman has been through so much. And for, like we said, two middle-aged fans, a lot of us who are our age and older have been through those same ringers of life with Aretha Franklin. So you know, when people are saying, "Oh, she planned her whole funeral and she planned to have all these people here," we're a little bit skeptical of that because, yeah, we've been around Riri for a little while.
Yeah, well, another reason why I'm skeptical too, because again, the point I was going to make earlier was that when you're faced with mortality, which we all will be one day, but I mean, but in her case, this wasn't a sudden death, you know.
True.
So this was, you know, you're faced with your mortality. You know, all the doctors, everybody told you that there's nothing they can do. Science can't help you. So I mean, you know that this is it for you,
right?
And I mean, look, we both just experienced in our own families recently deaths in our own families.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and usually when that time comes, from what I have heard from people who are facing those things and watching it in my own family, people are usually concerned about their own lives, retrospect, and you know, you know, basically concerned about what kind of legacy they're going to leave behind, what kind of attitudes they're going to leave behind. A lot of times people are faced with making amends and doing all those things. And usually planning your funeral is not at the top of your list.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, you know, yeah, you might, you know, maybe somebody say, well, you know, Aunt Riri, who would you like to come? And they might read a list of names to her, and she might say, oh, yeah. But I don't think that there was a thing where she sat at a desk with somebody or however they done it. Yeah, and say, I don't want that person here, but that person could come there. I'm a little skeptical about that. But like I said, if I'm wrong, if there's anybody out there who has intimate knowledge of those things, please correct me. But now that we got that out the way, we're going to go into the meat of this whole thing, because you said it was 6 hours long. 6 hours. The who's who of Black clergy was there, and Minister Farrakhan. The who's who of Black clergy was there, and Minister Farrakhan, who was not allowed to speak.
He wasn't, but they let him sit in the pulpit.
Yeah. He was up there on Honors Row.
He was
on Honors Row.
And let's talk about Honors Row for a minute, shall we? If Aretha Franklin had anything to do with planning this film, I'm a little angry at Aunt Riri. If she indeed invited all of these people who showed up and sat up there on Honors Row, excuse me, baby, at her funeral behind her flower encased, her bouquet encased casket, as it should have been. I mean, it was lovely, lovely.
Yeah.
And it was a grand send off. It really was. And
well deserved. I mean, for her.
Well deserved. Absolutely befitting the queen that she was.
Yes.
But some of the people who were invited to represent her legacy, because we're going to talk about respecting the dead tonight, not only in Aretha Franklin's case, but also in John McCain's case a little bit later on. But right now, let's talk about this Honors Row up in the pulpit at Aretha Franklin's funeral.
Which is anybody who's been to the Black church know. Anybody who's been to any traditional Black church know there's always an Honors Row behind the pulpit.
Exactly. If you ever go to a Black church, and this has happened to me because I've been in youth ministry. I've done, panel discussions. We've been on panel discussions. We've sat in churches and people are like, oh, I see the Luqmans are here. Come on up here. And we're like, nope. No, we're not going up there. We're not ordained to preach anybody's anything. We know some stuff, but we understand the weight that comes with sitting in that pulpit. And a lot of people take it very lightly and go up there just for show. Ooh, I'm in the pulpit. We're not those kind of Christians. We don't play around like that. That position holds a lot of weight and is very serious position. And we are very sober minded about sitting in somebody's chair in somebody's pulpit. But doggone it, if Aretha Franklin invited Bill Clinton to sit in Honors Row in the pulpit, and I'm mad at Aunt Riri for that, because I don't understand how anybody could look at Bill Clinton and say that he in any way respected Aretha Franklin's legacy.
Right. I know they said that she sang at his inauguration or something, I believe. I don't know if I'm wrong about that, but again, it goes to this point, something that I posted on my Facebook page earlier today. And I have to ask this question: why do black people feel the need? I understand he's the next president. I understand that. But why do black people feel the need to always honor Bill Clinton when we have these major African, which I consider Aretha's funeral, an African American event? I mean, you know, why do we always feel that that as a community that we have to honor this man? Consider and I, you know, when I posted that, you know, I've gotten some. Well, you know, one of the people on my page said, well, you know, he gave her a medal, and they were friends. And I said, okay, fine, but he could have sat out there in the audience with the rest of her friends.
Exactly.
You know, you know, and the fact that black people and one reverend, because it was a shameful display to me. Not all the pastors I had a problem with. Reverend Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson, you and I both didn't have major problems with them. But some of these pastors, the groper, you know, the groper, and then we had the
Reverend Ruckus.
Yeah, Reverend Ruckus.
Reverend
right. And
Jasper Williams. We gonna dig into him.
And whoever called Bill Clinton the first black president. I mean, this is the type of nonsense, man, that we as black people have to start. We got to give that up.
Yeah, I mean, look, let me explain to you why black people should stop celebrating Bill Clinton. Now, okay, you said that people that Aretha Franklin sang at Bill Clinton's.
I mean, that's what I was told. I think she did. Yeah, I think she did. Yeah.
I think she may have. I honestly don't remember the inauguration.
Either. I mean, it was like what?
I remember them walking across the bridge and doing that ridiculous lighting the bridge as they walked across the bridge. But see, nobody knew what a monster Bill Clinton was when he was inaugurated, right? So, okay, I can understand her wanting to sing for his inauguration. But let me tell you what Bill Clinton actually did to black people. First of all...
Yeah, if you don't know what he did, we're about to tell you.
First of all, Bill Clinton's track record as governor of Arkansas was crappy in regard to black people.
And he was a governor of Arkansas twice, I believe, right?
Twice. Now, remember the stuff that came out about the Clintons using inmate labor in the state house?
Yep.
And Hillary Clinton calling them her inmates or some crap like that. Oh, it was just a tradition. Now, these are people who are supposed to be our friends, right? Who are supposed to be so good to black people. Well, let's talk about the crime bill, shall we? There's an article that we're going to share with you from The Guardian. Online publication. It was written in April of 2016 by Thomas Frank. Title of the article is Bill Clinton's Crime Bill Destroyed Lives and There's No Point Denying It. We've said that so many times.
Yeah.
But since people don't actually listen to black people, well, and I've actually, we've had these conversations about Bill Clinton being at this woman's funeral and the monster that he is, not was, but still is,
right,
in regard to black people, because he now in the last campaign he was chiding Black Lives Matter activists who were challenging Hillary Clinton on her super predator BS, telling Black Lives Matter activists that they were siding with the murderers.
Yeah.
I mean, so this is the Bill Clinton who not only signed the crime bill, because the 1994 crime bill that ramped up mass incarceration to like extinction levels in our communities. And people like to say or make excuses of Clinton that he only signed the bill, he didn't know what he was doing. It's like when people want to make excuses for presidents, and I don't care who the president is, when people want to make excuses for presidents, when they're defending them, they say, well, he's the leader of the free world. I don't understand what that even is. What the hell is the free world? The free world didn't elect the president of the United States. Yeah. So the president of the United States is not the leader of the free world. He's the president of the United States. But they make all these excuses. Oh, well, you know, he's the leader of the free world. He has a hard job. You know, these bills are complicated and they can't know everything.
Yet he campaigned for the job.
But campaign for the job. And then when the legislation starts killing people, then all of a sudden the presidents don't know anything. They're either the smartest people on the planet, that they are the leader of the free world, or the legislation is so horrible and the policies are killing people, and then, oh my God, they had no idea that that's what was going to happen. So this is the way people responded to Bill Clinton. It was like, here's a Rhodes Scholar. Remember, Bill Clinton is a Rhodes Scholar.
Yeah, he's a brilliant guy.
Brilliant guy. Yeah. But all of a sudden, he had no idea that the outcome of the crime bill was going to be what it was. But for that to be true, Thomas Frank says, then Bill Clinton would have to have ignored the studies that were done on the way the bill was structured, specifically the sentencing disparities between crack and powder cocaine. Back in the early 1990s, and although they were chemically almost identical, crack and powder cocaine were regarded very differently by the law. The drug identified with Black users, crack, was treated as though it were 100 times as villainous as the same amount of cocaine, a drug popular with affluent professionals. This now notorious 100-to-1 sentencing disparity, as the New York Times put it, had been enacted back in 1986. And the 1994 crime law instructed the U.S. Sentencing Commission to study the subject and adjust federal sentencing guidelines as it saw fit. The Sentencing Commission did that the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity be abolished. They told Clinton in 1994, before he signed this bill, abolish this 100-to-1 disparity because it is racially targeting. It has a disparate impact on Black people. Right.
So he was warned about that.
Yep.
Even before he signed the bill.
Yes.
So he had full knowledge that the sentencing disparity would disproportionately affect Black and brown people.
Right. So Thomas Frank goes on to say that the Sentencing Commission recommended that the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity be abolished. By the time their report was released, however, Republicans had gained control of Congress, and they passed a bill explicitly overturning the decision of the Sentencing Commission. Just for the record, and Thomas Frank throws this in here, just for the record, Bernie Sanders did vote against that bill. Okay, voted against this bill to keep the sentencing disparity. The bill then went to President Clinton for approval. Shortly before it came to his desk, he gave an inspiring speech deploring the mass incarceration of Black Americans. He said, "Blacks are right to think something is terribly wrong." He said on that occasion, "When there are more African American men in our correction system than in our colleges," and that actually is not true. It's never been true.
That's a lie that's been allowed to persist.
It was a lie then. It's a lie now. Yeah. When almost 1 in 3 African American men in their 20s are either in jail, on parole, or otherwise under the supervision of the criminal system, nearly 1 in 3. 2 weeks after that speech, however, Clinton blandly affixed his signature. He signed the bill, keeping the 100-to-1 sentencing disparity, a disparity that had brought about the lopsided incarceration of Black people. Clinton could have vetoed it. He was the president of the United States. He could have vetoed it.
Now, the thing of it is that this came to haunt Hillary when she ran for president against Donald Trump.
Yes, it
and
did.
Bill Clinton was going out there apologizing and saying, well, I didn't know that, this was going to really, jail a lot of Black people. Didn't know. And then I apologize. We just, we didn't. And then, this whole thing about, because Hillary said the same thing. Well, we were faced with this dilemma, and, we didn't know this was something that was new to us and blah, 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 blah. And we didn't know how to handle it and this and that and the other. Would we do it differently? Yes, we would, But when it comes to Black America, that is always often the excuse by government when they approve policies that they know is going to harm us in a very in severe ways. And then when we call them on it after the damage has been done, and not that after the damage has been done, when there has been no attempt by government to correct it.
That's the problem.
See, that's the thing.
That's the
it's one thing of saying we didn't know what to do, and we did what we thought was best. But then when you see what a disaster it is, then government makes no attempt to correct it.
Right.
And so we're still left with the damage done, even though you get up there with your hearts and tears and ask for forgiveness and, and all this other kind of stuff.
Right. So here we are at Aretha Franklin's funeral, and Bill Clinton, mass incarceration architect, well, not architect, but mass incarceration, what do you want to call it? The guy who put mass incarceration into overdrive, put mass incarceration on steroids, when he could have stopped it. He literally could have stopped the flow of mass incarceration in regard to nonviolent drug offenses, crack versus powder cocaine. He could have stopped that in its tracks by vetoing that bill. But because he wanted to appeal to the tough on crime, middle American white male Republican voters, and he wanted to work across the aisle. See, this is where political compromise kills Black people. Nobody's going to stand up against bad conservative policy that is disproportionately harmful to us from the Democrats. They're not going to do that. Bill Clinton didn't do it. When he had the chance to really be a friend to Black people, all he did was sign the bill.
Yeah, and it was also, used because, it was also a very, it was a political strategy, as you say, to appeal to mainly the Southern constituency. So it was still part of the Southern strategy of once again using Black people as the whipping post.
Right.
And the tough on crime, because we already know that every time politicians talk about tough on crime, they talk about being tough on Black people.
Thank you. Say that again.
Yeah, every time politicians would say tough on crime, they meant, talk tough on Black people. And that's the dog whistles. So it's like, yeah, we're gonna be tough on crime, and wink wink, we're gonna be tough on them Black folks.
It's the Negro.
Right. And so and what happens is that this crime bill went past, and then we started seeing over policing of our communities.
Right.
And not just over policing of our communities. Bill Clinton also approved more police, because that was part of the crime bill. He approved like 200,000 more cops. And he also approved for police departments to receive military grade weapons.
The 1033 program, which is why you saw what do they call them? Anti-artillery combat vehicles on the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, and on the streets of Baltimore and Philadelphia and up at Standing Rock.
Right.
Thanks, Bill Clinton. So this is the guy that Aretha Franklin invited to speak at her funeral because she sang at her inauguration. Now this is
the same Aretha Franklin now who has a civil rights track record.
Right.
This is the same Aretha Franklin who we saw a picture of earlier today that someone posted online of her in Muslim dress speaking at a Nation of Islam mosque.
That's right. So I'm really skeptical about whether Aretha Franklin really did invite that monster to her funeral, and if she did, okay. But here's my bigger problem. Nobody else involved with her family or the planning of that funeral, nobody else knew any better to say, wait a minute, why is Bill Clinton, do you know what he did? And this is the problem we have with celebrity worship, I think, among Black people, but especially in the Black church. The lack of political maturity in the Black church is frightening. And as much as I loved, I feel like Aretha Franklin's funeral was like the best of the Black church. It was the best of the best traditions of the Black church, where we don't mourn death.
No, we call it a homegoing.
We call it a homegoing. Now that's kind of psychologically unhealthy a little bit, but it's probably why one of the reasons we're kind of messed up as a people, that we just don't accept. Okay, people are not here anymore, and we need to deal with that. We need to grieve, and grief is okay, and it's a normal thing, and crying is perfectly all right, But we celebrate a person's life in the Black church.
Right.
And there's a whole bunch of, there's a whole bunch of weirdness in that. But it's also a good thing because you get this community that comes around and supports the grieving family, and it's a jubilant occasion, in the midst of this grief, and it's beautiful, right? But at the same time, that service was also the worst of the Black church.
Oh, definitely.
And the people who were on that stage who spoke at her funeral was one of the reasons, because the lack of maturity that exists in what is still the most influential institution in the Black community in America, I think.
Yeah.
The Black church is frightening. The fact that a bunch of Black folk really believe that Bill Clinton is still the first Black president.
But let's bring up this point. Let's bring up this point before we get about it that you made earlier about Honors Row, that there were no women up there.
I mean, the whole patriarchy thing.
The whole patriarchal part of the Black church, you saw that being displayed on Honors Row.
I mean, Cicely Tyson did speak. I don't know where she was. I guess she was off to the side somewhere. I don't know. But when you looked at all of the footage during the live segment, all you saw were all these men.
Yep.
The pastors were men. There were no female pastors. There were no female reverends speaking for the Queen of Soul.
Right.
In 2018, Black church, why that is? I can't even be grammatically correct about that, because that's some patriarchal, sexist bullshit. And let's be honest, traditional congregations, the more conservative congregations, the Baptists, the Church of God in Christ, the Pentecostals, and all the apostolics and the holiness, y'all notorious for that crap.
Yeah.
Y'all notorious for women can't be preachers. I don't mind a woman teaching, but a woman can't preach. And if a woman can preach, then okay, I don't mind a woman preaching, but she can't pastor a church. And where do we get this from? That ridiculous misinterpretation of a scripture where Paul, who I got serious problems with, where Paul says that a woman should not speak in church. Never mind in an open assembly of believers. Never mind that the scripture was talking about the disorder in a meeting of believers where women were not being taught what was being said at these meetings by their husbands. So their husbands were going to these meetings because, remember, we're talking about a patriarchal society in ancient biblical times, right? Where women were not allowed in a lot of places where men were. So even among the community of believers, they still hadn't gotten Jesus's message that, no, I'm not a respecter of persons. We're all equal here. So men were going to learn about the gospel, and they weren't telling their wives. And their wives were like, I want to know what's going on with this Jesus person. Tell me. And their husbands weren't. So their wives would go to the next meeting and start asking questions. Just look, what does Jesus say about blah, blah, blah?
But I think the problem is, that aside, but I think the problem is also that those attitudes, the lack of representation of Black women being up front at the funeral, and also the attitudes of that, the patriarchal attitudes that these leaders, these pastoral leaders have towards women, for the fact we're one reverend. I mean, it is almost as if women are still property that you can just, I mean, let's look at the Ariana Grande thing and the pastor who was groping her, because I call that groping. I looked at that photo because when you had brought it to my attention, and I looked at the photo and you said, well, his hand was around her waist. And then I looked at it, I said, no, that hand is up there near her breast. Right. I said, no, it's up there near her breast. Clearly the young lady was uncomfortable, but what I'm saying is that these attitudes and the fact that I've witnessed you go online battling women, not men, women who didn't take any, who wouldn't talk about the despicable display of the pastor of putting his hands on this woman without her permission, but they're talking about her dress, and how she these are from women.
These are from Black women. Excuse me. I guess they're in the church talking about he didn't do nothing wrong. The problem was her dress was too short. He didn't do nothing wrong. So I had one lady tell me online that the only thing dirty that happened was in my mind when I looked at that video. Now, okay, admittedly, a lot of dirty stuff does happen in my mind, and usually I acted out on him. But this time, no, he was wrong. That man clearly had his hands all over that young woman.
He did.
And when she tried to pull away in a respectful way, to not, because honestly, she could have kicked him. She should have kicked him in his nuts.
Right.
She should have kicked him in his nads. He should have. I understand it was church, but understand that that's what's going to happen to you if you do. I mean,
but he has no connection to this woman.
No connection whatsoever.
Right. No connection to this woman. What would And the fact that he felt. And this is my beef with this is that the fact that he has no relation, no connection to this woman whatsoever, probably the first time meeting this young lady, but he didn't feel any apprehension of putting his hands up and this proves to me, or shows me, I should say, the attitude he must have to the women in this church.
Right.
You know what I mean? That there is no boundary set in his own place of worship where he feel that he just got it like that he could just grab a woman around her breasts or whatever, or touch her without her permission, and she's supposed to be okay with it.
Right. And we know that this is true about the way he feels, because we see from the way a lot of Black women responded in defending him. Now, I'm not saying that every Black woman did, but way too many Black church ladies were making excuses for this man and focusing on Ariana Grande's dress and how inappropriate her dress was for a funeral service. Now, would I have worn a dress that short? No. But what she wore and how short it was.
She's a kid. I mean, to us, she's a kid.
But let's be real here. What she wore, how short it was, what it looked like, whether she was exposed in every crack and crevice that she had, doesn't have anything to do with what that man did. And the way he put his hands on her, nothing. And the fact that the way she was dressed was brought up by women in defense of this pastor is emblematic of the problem that we have in the Black church with sexual abuse. If you think it's only happening in the Catholic Church, think again. Why do you think there are all these people who sit around? Lord Jesus, I have kept this to myself for so long. I used to belong to a church where the pastor all the time would talk about the evils of abortion. And I had people who were friends who were, every year they would go to this March for Life business, the March for Life rally down here in DC. And they would always tell me, Jackie, you should come. And I would always tell them, it's not that serious for me. It's what somebody else does with their body is none of my business. And I don't believe there's anything in the Bible that tells me that God is angrier at abortion than he is at oppressing the poor. Because he talks about oppressing the poor, but he doesn't talk about abortion. So y'all go ahead and do that. This pastor would preach about abortion and purity and how women need to be pure, and make comments about women buying underwear from Victoria's Secret and how we don't need to do that because who we trying to impress. But 2 or 3 of the upstanding ladies in the church, when their daughters got knocked up, they took them to get an abortion. And nobody said anything to them. But the pastor this male pastor still goes on to shame the women on our behavior. Nobody ever said anything about these boys who got these girls knocked up. One of them, I think, was one of the pastor's sons. I have no proof of that, but I think it's true.
Allegedly.
Right. But see, this is the kind of attitude that exists in too many Black churches. Not all of them, but too doggone many of them, where people don't question the men in leadership and the men connected to the men in leadership. So if you realize that there are men in church or young boys in church who are getting a bunch of women pregnant, don't you think that there's some abuse going on that people aren't telling anybody anything about? I have heard women talk about, well, yeah, I know he probably shouldn't have put his hands on her like that when a girl tried to tell somebody that a deacon touched her, or that a trustee put his hands on her or was inappropriate with her. And I have heard women, church women, older than me, much older than me. Well, I know he got a problem with his hands, but she shouldn't have been in the car with him by herself. She shouldn't have been in the office with him by herself. She shouldn't be fast like that. She always grinning up in his face. I've heard Black women in the church do that enough to know that this pastor at Aretha Franklin's funeral, you're exactly right. He feels like he has carte blanche to put his hands on any woman in any setting, especially in a church, because that's the carte blanche that's been given him, not by the men in the church, but by the women.
And I can't help to draw the point that with these Abrahamic religions, especially Christian, Islam, Judaism and stuff, how they always put the onus of sexual responsibility on the women.
Right.
It's not just Christianity. I mean, Islam does it, makes women cover. All of the onus is responsibility is put on the woman, to make sure that the men don't sin.
Right.
Judaism, make sure that the men don't sin. And all three religions, Abrahamic religions, are very patriarchal to the point where women are seen, and none of the other two faiths that claim under the Abrahamic flag can deny that either. The fact that women are blamed when sexual problems happen, it's always, I told you one time about in Islam how women are not even encouraged to speak with a nice voice to men,
right?
Because because men are, we're so weak sexually. Let me tell you something. I used to go to this Muslim, and all of you out there know that I wasn't the Islamic faith, so I used to go to a Muslim shop where they had a young woman who was, now mind you, the proprietor of the store, and I'll make this brief, the proprietor of the store had her deal with the customers who came in. She was at the counter.
Right.
So I remember coming in and ordering something, and I gave her the greeting, and I said, "Assalamu alaikum, sister." Alaikum salam. Now, she sounded like McGruff.
What?
Alaikum salam. And I'm like, and I went down and I said, "That's all you want, brother?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay, alhamdulillah." And it dawned on me why she was talking that way.
That wasn't her natural voice.
That wasn't her natural voice, but it's this thing where prophetic tradition in Islam states that women are encouraged to talk harshly to men so not to turn us on.
Are you serious?
No, this is, yeah. So I am serious, and what I'm saying is, and I'm not making fun of it. What I'm saying is that the onus of responsibility when it comes to sex, sexual behavior is always placed on a woman in all of these religions. So I mean, we need to call it out. So anyway, segueing from that into now we get to Reverend Ruckus.
Reverend Uncle Ruckus.
Right.
Whew, boy. Listen. You all know that we're Christians. We're active in our UCC church. We are well aware of the true history of our faith. We understand that a lot of Black people who go to church today are operating under the white supremacist translation of an African-based faith. That's just true. And we get that a lot of Black folks who go to church don't believe that. And we can point to the way the Black church in America, I mean, almost unilaterally turned its back on Reverend Wright.
He was not there.
He was not. That's a good point.
He was not there.
He has been very sick. But you're right. He was not.
Now, I don't know if it was health issues that kept him away. I don't know. I don't know if he just wasn't able to attend due to health reasons.
Right.
I don't know what his present state is.
Yeah, that's a good point. We didn't even talk about that earlier. We just thought about that. But Reverend Wright is a Christian pastor in the Black liberation theology tradition. That's a thing. It exists. And it has always existed in the Black church. But through a confluence of different things, you know, partially slavery, partially the rise of prosperity gospel, partially the influence of conservative evangelicals, white conservative evangelicals on mainstream Christianity of America, the Black liberation theology tradition it's almost like it went underground a little bit. And I think the Reverend Wright thing when Obama was running helped drive it further underground. So it's not like there aren't Black Christians who don't know the revolutionary liberation roots of our faith. It's just that the Black Christians who get the most TV time are the ones like Reverend Uncle Ruckus, who spoke at Aretha's funeral. Let me stop calling that man Reverend Uncle Ruckus, because he actually has a name. His name is Reverend Jasper Wright Williams. I'm sorry, and apparently he was a friend of Aretha Franklin's father. He is the pastor of Salem Bible Church in Atlanta. And I'm just going to read you some of the ridiculous white supremacist BS this man said in a Black church at a Black woman's funeral. He said, there was a time when, as a race, we had a thriving economy. I remember we had our own little grocery stores. We had our own little hotels. They weren't big and fancy, but they were ours. As bad as the days of Jim Crow and segregation were, it forced us to each other instead of forcing us on each other. We quickly come to realize that as a people, all we really have is one another. But when we marched, when we protested, when we got through saying we shall overcome, yes, we were rewarded with integration. First of all, I had a serious problem with we weren't rewarded with integration. We didn't enter a contest and spell a word right, Bama. We bled. Right. And we can argue whether integration was a good thing or a bad thing.
But the thing of it is the fact that, and these are the things that we have to challenge when we hear this, because the civil rights movement was not about integration.
Exactly.
The civil rights movement was about access to equal rights. Exactly. It wasn't about integration. And that, that's what it's been turned into. But the Black folks that were out there protesting and that was out there on the front lines and stuff, they wasn't really seeking integration.
Right. They were seeking justice.
They were seeking justice, right? So, equal access, to institutions and being treated fairly by those institutions. Exactly. It wasn't so much as people try to demean it so much. Oh, you just wanted to sit on a toilet next to a white man.
Right.
Come on.
No, let's stop watering it down to that. That's when I got a clue. It's like, okay, he's one of those Negroes who has no idea about our own history.
None at all.
He doesn't understand. Oh, but it gets better. So he says, we got what we fought for. We got what we marched for. But with the birth of integration, there also came the loss of not only the Black community's economy, but there also came the loss of the Black man's soul.
Because that's why. Look, I'm kind of wishing. I'm kind of wishing that we could play his actual audio, because I had really. I mean, this thing really got me. I mean, because believe me, I have the utmost respect for the traditional preaching that's in the Black church, especially the Black Southern church, because I understand that it's rooted in African tradition.
Right.
So I don't make fun of that, but I make fun of him because the fact that he was using the best, and it goes back to your point earlier about stating how the funeral that we seen, especially with respect to the clergy, was the best and the worst of what we seen in the Black church tradition.
Right.
So the cadence was cool. I loved it. But he was like, if Black lives matter so much, then it should, we should not be killing one another. And, and if you just respect one another, and then, and I'm saying, like, dude, what I mean? I mean, dude, okay, The cadence and stuff is cool with me, but this whole thing of always putting the responsibility of our trauma that's been that's been put on us and making us responsible. One of the things that he said, and you didn't read that in there, but one of the things that I have to take issue with was when he said in one of his cadence that the police cannot deal with our kids.
Oh my God. This man said, and they don't actually have that on here. We're going to share the clip.
Right.
We're going to find the actual clip, share the clip with you when this show ends, when it's finished processing.
Right.
That man said some of the most despicable things that if you did not see his face and know that he was a black man, you really would have thought he was a white guy.
That this was David Duke in blackface up there pretending to be a black preacher.
Seriously, I mean, the fact that he believes that it was integration alone that destroyed black businesses. Dude, Black Wall Street was bombed. It was the first instance of a bomb being dropped by airplane in the United States. That was done to a thriving black community. Dozens of thriving black communities were destroyed by racist white mobs. We talked about that over on Brick by Brick. Yeah. I'll give you the link for those if you want the link. For heck, I ought to send them to him so he could learn something. But
this is the type of lazy.
Yep.
The lazy narration of our history. Let me say lazy, ignorant, misinformed narration of our history that's allowed to get away unchallenged by most people. And these talking points, I'm telling you, trust my word, after Fox News and all of these other conservative outlets, they're going to ignore everything else and they're going to highlight what this guy says, because every time someone gets up and chide us as a community, every time somebody gets up and chide black people, then all of these racist outlets, all of these conservative neo-racist outlets come out and be like, see, it's not just us saying y'all fucked up. Your own pastor is saying that, but look, the thing of it is that when Bill Cosby did it, I didn't like it. And it's this particular generation. We talk about Cosby, we talk about this guy who is probably in his 70s. So it's this generation that is holding on to this ideology that somehow white people will accept us more if we change whatever behavior they think is not that's not in line with what white people or the majority of white people think we should behave. Exactly. As if white people behave that way. See, and this is the thing. First of all, a lot of these talking points that the Reverend said, that Cosby said, and a lot of these other people who take who promotes this stuff and push this stuff. First of all, the data does not back none of that up. Right. For one thing, the pastor says something about out of wedlock births in the black community.
70% of our children live in homes that are run by mothers.
Right. Now,
where are the black men?
Right. Now, the thing of it is, once again, that doesn't back it up. Yes, it is true that the black community has a higher percentage of female-headed households, but also that they don't never take out is that the poor white women are fastly catching up. So if you got black women at 72%, I think, which was the last statistic I remember seeing maybe about a year ago, white women is like 50-some%.
Right.
You know what I mean? And as the economy continues to shift from bottom to top, and people at the bottom are getting less and less, then those white single mothers and household, because you can't maintain a family when people are becoming more and more impoverished.
Exactly.
We've seen that during the Great Depression when men would leave their families because they couldn't work, they didn't find work, they couldn't support their family, and so they felt that it was, and they were right in some ways, that a woman with kids would get help a lot quicker if I wasn't there. Hasn't the liberal welfare system that was set up have shown us that that black women and children can get help quicker, or are able to get help readily if the man's not around,
because that's right. The rule they put in place for black women in particular,
right? And they encourage the man not to be there, so these men in the Great Depression who left their families, that was their idea. It wasn't that they left their families or they abandoned their families because they no longer wanted to support. They couldn't support them, right. And they understood that what little relief was out at that time, that people would have more sympathy for a woman with children, as opposed to if a whole family with a man was there, right. And be like, well, why can't he do something?
Exactly.
So men understood that. And let's mention this too, that a lot of these men left their families, and not just abandoned family during the Great Depression. And I know this is not about that, but I just have to put this as in context, that a lot of men left their families and hopped on trains and stuff and went all over the country to look for work.
That's true. Exactly.
Exactly. And so a lot of people never mention that. Just like in the black community, a lot of men who had children with single women and stuff, it wasn't that they were absent from those families. A lot of times those men live elsewhere, and what little employment that they have, right. Some of them try to give what they can to their kids or whatever. Right. But when the government takes statistics, when the government takes information, they don't include all of this. They take this and they say, oh, well, there's no man in her household.
Exactly.
But that man could be living right around the corner and giving her a little bit of money. Y'all know how we do in our community. That man could be living around the corner and could be coming over and handing his kid's mom money, because I've seen this happen, hand her money every time, and it's not recorded. Well,
the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, like we said last year when this study came out, we've talked about it since it's come out. They did a study that proved that out of all of the groups of men, white men, Asian men, Hispanic men, and black men are the most involved in the lives of their children, even if they do not live in the home. The CDC has proven the lie that black men just aren't involved in their children. They've proven that to be false.
But yet you get Reverend Ruckus up there, and he'll sit up there and mention the same racist talking points that you could hear from any conservative or any anti-black person who holds anti-black views, and sit up there and say, because just recently I've heard on the radio when they were talking about the 44 people that were shot in Chicago a couple of weeks ago. And I listened to C-SPAN, and all these white callers calling up talking about, well, the reason why that is because, black people don't have fathers in the home.
So there's a criminal running around and he's planning to shoot some people, but he wants to make sure that he only shoots people who don't have fathers in the home.
Right.
So before he starts shooting people standing on the corner, he rolls down the window and asks, yo, everybody who has a father at home, y'all need to leave, because we'll shoot everybody else. Are you fucking
right?
And okay, and let's talk that just the ridiculousness of those kinds of statements. But as a quick aside on that Chicago shooting story, when you think about the that level of violence in one neighborhood, and we see that here in DC.
Yeah, we have an uptick in homicides here in DC right now.
This is gonna be real quick. Wherever we go in our neighborhood, there's a cop. I'm serious. There's a cop car that we can go half a mile up the street to the gas station.
Can I mention the statistics real quick?
Yes.
Washington, DC, where we live, have the highest concentration of police than any other municipality in the country per capita person. And when they measure that, you might not believe this, but DC has the third largest police force in this country. There's New York, there's Los Angeles, and then there's DC.
So if there is nowhere we can go, I guarantee you we can leave this house right now, go up to the gas station. There'll be PG County cops on one side of the street, PG side of the street, DC cops on the DC side of the street. If we go in the other direction to the other gas station or by the Safeway, there's going to be a cop over in the Safeway parking lot. There's going to be a cop parked in the gas station parking lot. There's going to be a cop parked in the CVS parking lot. There is nowhere we can go in our neighborhoods where there is not a visible police presence. Right. So explain to me, how come they can't find all these people who are killing me, who are killing people? Don't tell me it's about this no snitching rule. No, it's not. It's because they have to keep crime high. They have to not solve crimes. Because if they solve crimes, if they catch all the criminals, then dang it, they're not gonna get no more money.
Well, and then another, yeah, and that's true. And then another thing too, and I sincerely believe this. I think that just like we have always talked on this show, and other people have talked about disaster capitalism, and the fact that that capitalism in certain aspects need it needs a disaster. It needs drama.
Right.
It needs, tragedy. And so what happens is DC, Chicago, a lot of these areas are being quickly gentrified.
Yeah.
Now, gentrification now you know, back in the old days, they could just come through with the Klan and burn black people's houses and tell them y'all got to move.
Yeah.
We want this area now. The Klan comes through at night. Burn down the houses.
Throw a Molotov cocktail in your window.
Lynch a few people who don't want to leave. And then the sheriff will come in and cordon off the area and let the Klan do what they do. And, without no interference from the outside, run all the black people out.
Right.
And then what happens is white people got more land. So, but see, now, it's a softer, gentler racism now. So what happens is now, so it's no longer that they just outright do that now. So what happens is the police are just told, don't heavily enforce laws in these areas. My point being, and don't tell me that that this doesn't happen. I lived in Philadelphia during the MOVE thing when the police dropped a bomb on the MOVE headquarters, and the fire department sat back and allowed a whole neighborhood of black people burn
all of Osage Avenue.
All of Osage Avenue, and we just celebrated. Well, not celebrated, but we just acknowledged the anniversary, the 40th year anniversary of that. So I mean, I lived there when they allowed Osage Avenue to burn, and even though Mayor Wilson Good, who was a black mayor at the time, called the fire department and said, "Put out the fire," they ignored him.
That's right.
And allowed that block to burn. So don't sit up here and tell me when there's greater interest involved, they have no problem resorting to these tactics. They have no problem saying that, well, it's just niggas killing niggas. So, and what happened is when that tragedy becomes so much and they make a crisis out of it, and then you get the mayor up there talking about, oh, well, we don't know, and all this other kind of stuff. What happens is now policies start being enacted.
Right.
And then these policies start being enacted. And what's happening is you have another forced removal. And then what happens is developers who always wanted that area anyway. We live in DC. We live in one of the areas that the developers want very bad. They didn't already overdevelop other areas of DC. Now they want to come to the 7th and 8th Ward. And unfortunately, that's where a lot of shootings are happening. Right. So this, in my view, is the fact that a lot of these things are allowed to happen because, see, then the politicians have excuses to put in these draconian policies. And then what happens is that there comes this removal. First of all, the removal is through mass incarceration. Right. So what happens is the removal, then there's going to be the over-policing and all this other kind of stuff. And then what happens is that they're going to make life so uncomfortable for those who remain behind that people are like, I got to get up out of here. Right. And then that just leaves the door open for more development, more venture capitalism, and all this other kind of stuff. So don't think that your government is not capable of those type of tactics as they are.
Exactly. And that's why the kinds of stuff that Reverend Jasper, Uncle Ruckus Williams, said in that pulpit at Aretha Franklin's funeral pisses me off so much. Because this man stood there and parroted these white supremacist, black pathology, just outright lies, just blatant lies. And in Detroit, the very same thing is going on. So he couldn't come to this funeral of this black woman at this black church in this black community and speak to the issues that black people in that community are facing. No, he came and he brought the white man, the white Republican Jesus message. That's what he did. I mean, this man stood in that pulpit and said, however the family goes, so goes the country. The first time I heard that was like maybe 10 years ago when I first heard of it was a local radio station here, Christian radio, that is more conservative Republican than it is actually Christian. Right. WAVA. And I think it was on the Focus on the Family, James Dobson. I can believe that. Yeah. And I heard him say, we have to protect the family, and however the family goes, whatever direction the family in this country goes, so goes the country. And it bothered me at the time. I heard it and I was like, I guess that kind of makes sense. But I didn't quite know why it didn't sit well with me until I started to connect the history of white people and the history of Black people in this country. If the health of the family dictates the health of this country, explain to me why so-called intact white families were able to lynch Black people and have a picnic and take pictures and take souvenirs and send souvenirs to their family and friends across the country. Their families were intact. They were married. They were mommy and daddy and 2 kids and a nuclear family.
Right. And how about, and why is it that a government institution that Black people were helping to pay for, which is the United States Postal Service, why do they allow those type of murderous pictures to go through and be delivered?
I mean, if however the family goes in this country, so goes the country, then explain to me how it is that intact white families were able to not only tolerate, but profit from 260 years of the enslavement of African people and our descendants and the utter destruction of our families. They profited from breaking our families apart, taking the children from our ancestors' arms.
In fact, in the United States, and me and you said this on one of our shows, that they've already done the numbers. I mean, smart Black people and smart white people who are allies done the research. 2 million Black men, women, and children in this country were separated from each other, family-wise. 2 million.
2 million Black women and children, Black men, women, and children were separated from each other.
Right.
During the
in this country.
Just in this country. During the slave trafficking. Yep. That wasn't the transatlantic slave trade. That was just when we got here.
Yep, 2 million.
That wasn't a bunch of illegitimate, amoral. Well, I shouldn't say not amoral, but that wasn't a bunch of illegitimate, bastard white children who didn't have a father figure in the home. No, that was white fathers and white mothers.
And these were white people, slave owners, and those connected to the slavery institution who were practicing capitalism.
Yep.
These families were separated just merely on making a profit.
Exactly. I mean, if it's true that however the family goes, so goes the country, then explain to me how all of these upstanding white people who have all of these families that they love so much, how come they didn't understand that drug addiction requires substance abuse treatment and not incarceration and criminalization until their kids got hooked on heroin and opioids. But when it was our kids who were hooked on crack, lock them niggas up. Well,
but then again, and we mentioned that on this show too, people like him. Because see, I want to be fair on this show.
Yeah.
I want to be fair on this show. I forgot who, and we posted the story. I'll find it, but it's a very brilliant brother who I got the story from. Very brilliant brother, has a website and stuff, and I'll get it. But it's people like this Reverend, what's his name,
Jasper
Williams, who also helped shape policy.
Yeah.
Right now, this brother had the one that I'm talking about, and forgive me for not recalling his name, but he had released an article where he spoke about how Black intelligentsia was also responsible for guiding government into these policies, which prioritize incarceration over of treatment in our community.
Right. That's right.
You know, so it wasn't just mean-spirited white people who were just sitting around saying we need to lock all those Black folks up. It was also these miseducated, college miseducated Black, so-called Black intelligentsia and reverends like him and everybody else who was sitting out there and said, we need more police. We need y'all to lock these folks up. We need you. Because I don't see any difference between him saying that the police can't handle our kids than Hillary Clinton calling our kids super predators.
It's the same thing.
I don't see any difference.
It's exactly the same thing.
Right.
It really is. And when you look at the ignorance in this man's comments, in his sermon, you recognize, and it should piss you off, because as a Christian, it pisses me off, because I've sat in churches with people who have said these things, and that's why I don't belong to those churches anymore, and I don't talk to those people no more, and they don't talk to me, because we have nothing in common. So I know that this kind of respectability doctrine, white supremacist, black pathology, coming straight out of the Moynihan report,
right?
You know, and right out of you know, racist ideas that justified slavery. We know that this kind of garbage is being preached in too many black churches across this country. There's a church not far from us right now,
right,
that has a big old banner on the side that says, if Black lives matter, then we must first stop killing each other. Whereas our church just has a big ass Black Lives Matter billboard out front with a big old fist too.
Right. And the church that makes the point that we don't have to all as a community or communities that we don't have to achieve sainthood, right, in order for our lives to matter.
Exactly.
That is not the requirement for any other group in this country.
No.
That everybody must behave in order for other folks to take their lives seriously. That is not a requirement that any other group in this country have to follow. But somehow, in order for our lives to be taken seriously or to have value, then all of us have to be like the Huxtables.
Right. Exactly. And so when you look at the things this man said in that context at that church in front of all those black ass people, then you understand how somebody like Governor Rick Snyder could speak at the same funeral.
Now, let's remind the audience who Rick Snyder is.
Rick Snyder is the governor who is not in prison because of the poisoning of Flint, Michigan. Because
of, and let's call it what it is, because it's Luqman Nation, of his chemical attack, because this is war.
It was chemical
Anytime warfare. The government makes the conscious decision of turning off good water and giving these people water that they know is filled with pollutants, chemical stuff, that is chemical warfare.
It's chemical warfare. It happened under Rick Snyder's watch. He didn't do anything about it. When he knew, he signed off on the decision. His decisions paved the way for the decision. He's not in prison. Flint still doesn't have clean water. Why did they let that bastard speak at that woman's funeral? You can't tell me that any black person who has any kind of political knowledge about anything would let that man in that church.
So I guess Aretha planned that too, huh?
Come on now.
This is the reason why I am in doubt that the Queen of Soul had a very major hand in allowing these rascals to attend her homegoing.
And this is the kind of thing that really pisses me off about the black church. And then we're going to leave the black church alone for the night, I guess.
Yeah, we didn't beat up on them.
Y'all, listen. The black church is still the most influential and powerful institution
and richest.
And the richest.
Let's not forget that.
It's also and the richest. Not every black church is rich. As a matter of fact, most black churches are just as broke as the rest of us are. But there are some black churches out there who mysteriously got a lot of money from a bunch of broke people. And I think they're getting that money from the government, because too many of these pastors are trotting out some crazy white supremacist. That's a whole nother show right there. But look up George W. Bush's faith-based initiatives and tell me if you don't think some of these churches got some of that good government money.
But you know that good government money come with a price. You know what I mean?
But so this is my problem with the black church, and this is my problem with this funeral. That unfortunately it was politicized in order to send this message of black respectability that white supremacists have been literally beating into us for 500 years now. And the fact that the people who decided to politicize Aretha Franklin's funeral to send that message pisses me off.
And then one and right, and it pisses me off too. But one thing that just came to my mind is that when he started, I'm talking about this pastor Jasper,
Jasper Ruckus Williams.
Right, Jasper Williams. The first when he first started this sermon of his, he said we're going to turn Black America around. You know, we're going to turn Black America around. But the same thing Cosby said when he was beating up on us too.
Right.
You know, we're going to reform Black America by beating up on us and all this stuff. But this is the problem I have with people of that ilk, is the fact they talk about turning Black America around. You cannot turn Black America. First of all, we don't need to be turned around. What we need is for the government of the United States, which we've supported so much with our lives, our money, our sweat, and everything else, to do right by us.
Yep.
You know what I mean? What we need is investment in our communities. What we need is to stop closing our schools, stop taking federal money and say that it's okay that you want to take federal money and arm teachers, but then you want to close our schools. Right. You want to, you know, our schools can't have up-to-date books. Our schools can't have up-to-date stuff so our kids can be prepared. But you don't have a problem, Betsy DeVos, saying that federal dollars can go to making sure that we have Wyatt Earp as a teacher in our schools. So, you know, so these pastors don't never call to task this type of behavior, which continues to assault us in so many ways. They don't talk about the fact of where right now, and yes, folks, the Poor People's Campaign is still going on. I know that there's been a virtual silencing of information about the Poor People's Campaign, but it's still going on. Right. And so, you know, but what I'm saying is that all of the issues that is being addressed by the Poor People Campaign, you don't see these pastors talking about, yeah, well, Black Lives Matter, but you know, you're just sitting up here talking about Black people killing each other. But what about the conditions we live? People don't understand, because of overdevelopment, because of gentrification, and because of all of these other things, poor people are being squeezed into very small spaces. And you know what happens when you have your relatives come over who stay too long? Tempers start to fly. When you got look, think about when you got relatives who maybe might be no circumstances of their own, but they got to stay with you for a few months. And imagine now you got folks moving into your house because they need a place to stay for a while. Your house becomes crowded. Everybody brings their funky ways to your house. You've been used to living a certain type of way. Then after a while, nobody has a plan on when they're going to move to the next stage. And you come home, your food is being eaten up, people scratching their ass in your kitchen and all this other kind of stuff. And all the stuff. Y'all know what I'm talking about. After a while, they may be family, but tempers flare. This is no different than what is being projected on us. You got people who are being crammed into these small spaces due to unaffordability of housing. Due to unaffordability of housing and poverty, they're being squeezed into these small spaces. And when people are on top of people, because we're starting to see it in DC. We just had a video, maybe many of y'all saw it, of a woman who went off taking a tire iron to a Greyhound bus. Yeah, because the bus, she thinks the bus cut her off. Yeah, the bus cut her off. But I see, and Jackie see, because when we travel every day, is that people's tempers are being short. People are overworked. Americans are famous for not taking vacations. There are too many people. Right, there are too many people in the city. On top of each other. Everybody's on top of each other, and people are being worked to death. They're stressed out. They're afraid to take vacations because, you know, after all, you know, we're Americans, fuck vacations. So, oh, the French, you know, they leave. But the thing of it is the fact that we have allowed this system to stress us to the point of now we're just lashing out at each other. Right. So when we take people, when we look at the violence that's being reported in our communities, yes, a lot of it is gang violence. A lot of it is people who are just in a certain criminal element that's going after each other. No different than when Al Capone and Dino Bannon and all that was going after. When Italians was going after the Irish over the bootleg trade. When the Russian mob is doing it now. When Italians, when the Genoveses was going after the Colombos and all stuff. So I mean, you know, but see, we romanticize that. Right. You know what I mean? We made, you know, we romanticize that. But then when you got you know, black gangs in Chicago, or you got gangs in DC, because they're also responsible for a lot of upticks in violence because they do have gangs in DC.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, when they're going after each other, so all of a sudden now it's like, oh, look at those blacks. You know, look how murderous they are, and look at the pathology of them. But that violence is in the same vein of, like we just mentioned earlier. So I mean, but then we also have to include too that a lot of that violence that happened with Al Capone and stuff in the 5 Points and stuff was also poor whites who was crammed into areas, living on top of each other, and they were and they had a little bit of crumbs, and they was all fighting over that.
Right,
but
no opportunities,
right. But what happened is the difference between that and us is that the government says we can't let our fellow whites continue to live like that.
That's right.
So what we have to do is take some of the wealth of the land and not only invest in the 5 Points and invest in these areas and give them opportunities and everything, but we also have to assimilate them in the fabric of America, something that was never done with us.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Right. Something that was never done with us. So don't sit back now with with our short memories that we're famous for in America, and our ahistorical attitude that we're so famous for in this country, and then all of a sudden look at it all and say, and look, why can't y'all folks stop killing each other? Well, why couldn't the Italians stop doing it? Right. Why couldn't the immigrant Jews that came here and was looking, and why couldn't Al Capone and his ilk stop doing it? Why couldn't the people in 5 Points stop doing it? So I mean, why couldn't the North and the South, the Confederates and the Union stop doing it?
Right.
You know what I mean? The largest murders of Americans happened during the Civil War. So I mean, why couldn't they do it? You know what I mean? So the thing of it is the fact that it's always been this hypocrisy when it came to black people. But we can't ignore that these economic that are being made on local government and federal government is driving people to the brink, and the violence is oftentimes the result of it.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you know, so I know a lot of people looked at Aretha's funeral and it was just like, you know, this is just entertainment. No. The people who decided to politicize that funeral and have the people on that honors roll that they did, the filthy, smarmy thing that Reverend Grabby McTaco Bell, and that was the other thing. The other thing he did when he made that joke about Ariana Grande saying that he didn't know who she was, and he thought when he looked at the program and he saw her name, he thought that it was something new on the Taco Bell menu.
But didn't he try, after his apology, try another bad attempt at ethnic humor about the border or something?
Yeah, I might have gone too far across the border. Bama, there's that. There's the clear issues of I'm not even going to call it toxic masculinity, because this is a case of men in positions of power. This isn't a toxic masculinity issue. This is a men in positions of power abusing their power, and women who have been indoctrinated in this system to just take it, but who now have become sort of the protectors of these men. And we gotta call this out in the Black church, and it's gotta stop. And this whole shucking and jiving for acceptance of the white man up in the pulpit, I'm all for working for Black churches. And as an activist myself, I know that we're not gonna reach the people that we want to reach if we don't engage in the Black church. But anytime you hear somebody like Jasper Williams preaching the garbage he does, and stay away from those people. Just stay away from those people.
Exactly.
Aretha Franklin's funeral was the best of the Black church, but it was also the worst of the Black church. And if we want to respect her legacy, then we need to tell the truth about that.
Yep. So on that note, because we got relatives we got to prepare for, we're going to end this now.
We have to talk about John McCain real quick.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about McCain.
We can't let that one slide, because people talking about respecting the dead for 2 damn weeks now. All right, John McCain died, last week?
He died last week, but his funeral, I think, was Friday. I think it was the same day as Aretha.
Yeah, he died last week, and doggone it, People kill me, and I know that was a bad pun, but people kill me talking about don't speak ill of the dead. First of all, where did that rule come from? If the dead actually did some messed up stuff, why can't I speak ill of the messed up stuff?
Look, that rule doesn't apply to Hitler. It doesn't apply to Pol Pot. It doesn't apply to Stalin.
Doesn't apply to Stalin.
Yeah.
Nope, doesn't apply to what's the
Bull Connor.
Thank you.
Bull Connor.
I don't understand why it should apply to John McCain. And honestly, if people are still talking about John McCain as a hero because he was a POW in Vietnam, this is the other problem I have. Now, this is the problem I have with politically immature people on the so-called left. The people who are pissing me off and who have pissed me off for the past week about John McCain hasn't been the conservatives. I expect them to lionize him.
Right.
Of course they think he's a hero. But I'm hearing these people who claim that they love themselves some Bernie Sanders and they're anti-war. I have had people who have memes on their page talking about I'm already against the last war, also talking about don't speak ill about John McCain. Have some class like Bernie did. Look, if Bernie Sanders is able to be friends with a warmongering liar like John McCain, then I question Bernie Sanders' integrity. Let me be real about this.
I put it like this: as much respect as I have for Bernie in certain areas, Bernie has always been to me the typical white liberal. You know, I mean, the typical white liberal who don't have problems making friends with people who are not friends with us.
Exactly.
You know, but that's his thing. I think that people had took the task that President Barack Obama, who was apparently was chosen by McCain to eulogize him along with George Bush, the younger.
Right. Which one is he? GW?
He's G.
HW was the daddy.
That was the daddy.
Okay.
He's GW.
Okay.
All right. So this is the thing. Obama, decided to go there as opposed to attend Aretha's funeral. But I'm glad that Barack Obama didn't attend Aretha's funeral. Because I could tell you how this would have went.
It would have
right. Yeah.
Uncle Ruckus sermon.
No, Obama would have went out. If Obama would have chosen to come and do Aretha's funeral, this is how it would have went. He's like, I'm so glad that I'm here tonight, and respecting the Queen of Soul. And I spoke with Miss Franklin, and she told me what she wanted me to say if ever I had the chance to eulogize her. And we spoke about it when I was president. And she said, Barry, she said, I want you to eulogize me if something happens to me. And I said, well, Miss Franklin, she said, no, call me Riri.
That's right. This the church people. That's right.
And I said,
that's
okay.
Right.
And I said, well, Riri, what do you want me to say? And she said, well, I just want you, Barry, to go there and just tell them what you think would be on my mind. And so I said, well, I'm sorry, Ree, that's what I do. And I'll go there and I'll do it. And I sat up there on this stage. I'm just telling you right now that Miss Franklin, Queen of Soul, she said to all of you black men that if you want to honor her legacy, pull your pants up. And all you black women out there, if you want to honor the Queen of Soul and be respectful to her legacy, stop having so many children out of wedlock. Be responsible mothers. And you black men, be responsible fathers. And I believe that the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin, Ree, I think she would be proud.
And that's what folks in that church would have done, because it was because you still can't say anything bad about Barack Obama to too many black people, which again speaks to the political naivete of way too many folks. But just the fact that Obama chose to go to McCain's funeral I think that encapsulates his whole presidency, don't you?
It does. It does.
I think it does too. I understand.
Well, Eric Michael Dyson, who I don't always agree with, but I was so glad that when he did speak at the funeral, that he brought that point up, and everybody knew he was talking about. When he said that there are certain people who don't want to be in places that's too black. That's
too black. He did. I mean, I hope when y'all heard that, I hope you didn't miss that he was talking about.
Right.
But anyway, we're not talking about that anymore. Listen, you Bernie Sanders progressives, you all cannot talk about being against war and say that John McCain is a hero in the same breath. You're out of your minds. Not only did John McCain not meet a war that he didn't want to vote for, I mean, this man, there is a video of John McCain singing to the tune of the Beach Boys' Barbara Ann. He's singing Bomb Iran. He was at some town hall meeting where somebody asked him a question about, when are we going to go over there and show those terrorists that we mean business? He's up on the stage and he actually starts singing Bomb, 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 Bomb Iran.
Yep, sure did.
And he laughed. That's John McCain. But if you really want to know what kind of person he was, I need you to look up, this is your homework. I need you to look up Keating 5. Keating, the number 5.
And no, we're not going to tell you.
No, we're not going to tell you because doggone it, we're not going to do everything for you. You need to learn some of this stuff yourself. Look up Keating 5. Then look up the savings and loan crisis.
Yep.
And then look up what John McCain did after the Keating 5 investigation was over. He was not an honorable guy. I'm sure he was a nice man to his family. And of course, condolences to his family for losing a family member. But that's all
As we all do.
We all do. But that's all we owe these people. Yeah. That's all we owe John McCain and his legacy, because his legacy is nothing but war. His legacy is bad Republican policies that have harmed people.
John McCain's legacy is the same legacy as George Washington, same legacy as Andrew Jackson, same legacy of all of these white supremacists, warmongering, American empire ideologues.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, his legacy is no different than Andrew Jackson's. It's no different than Theodore Roosevelt's. No different than all of these white supremacists who went to the lands of brown and black people to murder them and then call it a noble war.
Right.
So so I mean, that's how I see it. He had his moments where, he stood up for Obama when some of the crazier ones, during his campaign, he had his moments, but, life isn't about how you lived in moments. You know what I mean? Life is about what was you consistent as a human being.
Right.
What was your character consistent of as a human being? What was your actions consistent of as a human being? Yeah, we all can rise to the occasion every now and then. But what was our action? The fact that this man died, and one of the last things that I remember reading about him was that he voted and supported Trump 83% of the time of Trump policies.
That's right.
So this wasn't no maverick. Everybody's calling him a maverick.
Everybody's calling him a maverick. He's not a maverick.
No.
People are like, oh, John McCain voted to save Obamacare. No, he didn't. John McCain voted that one time to keep the Republicans from completely repealing the ACA because he wanted a full replacement. That's what he campaigned on, but he didn't want the whole system to just collapse. So he voted against the full repeal of the ACA, only to go back and vote for the repeal of the individual mandate.
You see what I mean?
What
maverick?
What maverick? This is a guy who that just you want to talk about the kind of character John McCain has, even though he defended at least, and I wouldn't even call it a defense. He challenged the racist notion that Obama is an Arab from that old white lady at that town hall meeting. Okay, that he should have done that. That's great. But he also accepted Sarah Palin as a running mate solely because of the kind of racist ideology that white people had against Barack Obama in the first place.
Which legitimized the whole faction that got us Trump.
Now, he can say that he regretted having her as a running mate, but don't act like that man didn't know.
Yeah, well, I regretted having my potato chips and cream cheese the other day, which drove my sugar up, but I ate it already.
You knew what those potato chips and cream cheese were going to do.
But the thing of it is, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't help now to say, "Oh, I should have never ate it." Right. I ate it already. You know what I mean? So I ate it already. So what happened was McCain could have done us a favor, or the country a favor, since he always put country first.
Right.
What he should have done was say, hell no, that crazy woman's not being my running mate because I don't want to legitimize people like her.
Exactly.
We probably would have not had Trump.
Say it again.
We probably would not have had Trump. But Sarah Palin, just like the white women that jog through our neighborhood, and we know that gentrification is coming, Sarah Palin was the gentrifier of the Republican Party.
Woo! Stop.
Yep.
Stop it.
She jogged through, and before you knew it, Tea Party got up in there.
Look, all this stuff. Condolences to his family, but all this stuff about that man being a hero. He asked that his family had Henry Kissinger speak at his funeral. How are you people on the so-called left going to hate Henry Kissinger, and then you hate the fact that Barack Obama dropped bombs on brown countries, but you calling John McCain a hero? Shut up with your ignorant self.
Yeah, the same Henry Kissinger now that's really wanted on war crimes.
Yeah.
So,
And when he dies, if anybody calls him a hero, you're just getting unfriended. You're just getting unfriended and blocked because we don't have time for that
one
kind
more
of
point we made for the audience before we leave.
Oh, what's that?
When you said about this whole thing about not speaking ill of the dead, and we said this before the show. Farrakhan dies, Al Sharpton dies, Jesse Jackson dies. Oh yeah, the conservatives are really going to be, they're really going to play nice with their words when it comes to them.
Oh sure, they're going to be real respectful.
Yeah, they're going to be respectful of the dead when
they
die. Yeah,
get out. I mean, please, a child, Tamir Rice couldn't even die without them talking about him like
Trayvon Martin. Yeah.
Anyway, the last note, and then we're going to be done for the night, y'all. Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick won the Nationalist Football League 0.
All right.
Colin Kaepernick's collusion case against the NFL will
No, but I like that because it reminds me of the old John McLaughlin thing. Colin Kaepernick won NFL 0.
Yep. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, NFL wrong again.
So according to, I'm reading this from the New York Times, in a major blow to the NFL, what we're calling now the Nationalist Football League,
right.
Colin Kaepernick achieved a preliminary but important win in his case, accusing the league of colluding to keep him off the field because of the player protests during the national anthem that he instigated. The ruling, essentially granting a full hearing on the dispute, keeps alive a case that the NFL desperately wanted to go away. The league is preparing for a new season beginning next week and is still grappling with how to diffuse the smoldering debate over players who demonstrate during the national anthem to protest racism, police brutality, and social injustice. Although the number of players who kneel has varied and dwindled over the course of last season, since Kaepernick first did so in 2016, during a wave of police shootings of African-American men, the issue continues to divide fans and vex owners. It has also inspired persistent tweets from President Trump, whose calls for players to kneel to be fired has put pressure on owners, many of whom support him. This is important because I love football, been a football fan for most of my little black life. I don't know everything about football stats. I can't keep stats in my head because numbers just don't work that way in my head. But for all the people who talked about, well, because, people like to make excuses for why black people get screwed over. And it's always our fault.
Yeah,
because, the excuse was that Kaepernick was a quarterback. No, he wasn't. Colin Kaepernick, once one of the league's best quarterbacks. This is the New York Times that said, Jackie Luqman didn't say this. You know, ESPN, the commentators at ESPN didn't say it. Black folks at New York Times said that Kaepernick was one of the best quarterbacks. Has been out of work since March 2017, when he became a free agent before the San Francisco 49ers could release him. As a parade of lesser quarterbacks, at least statistically and in performance, yes, found work, he filed a grievance asserting that the league's owners had conspired to keep him out because of his protests. In a ruling this week that was disclosed Thursday, the arbitrator, Stephen B. Burbank, who was appointed by the league and the NFL Players Association, said lawyers for Kaepernick had
yeah, I told you, yeah.
We're paying attention to the wrong collusion case. Okay. Stephen Burbank said the lawyers for Kaepernick had unearthed enough information in the past year for the case to proceed to a full hearing. After months of depositions, including those given by some of the most powerful owners in the league, as well as document searches, the lawyers will be able to question league officials, owners, and others in a trial-like format.
Now, Mark Garagos, he's famous.
Yeah.
I believe Mark Garagos was, I think he represented Michael Jackson in his
I think he did too.
His case too. Yeah. So he's not a lightweight guy.
No, he's not a lightweight at all. This whole Kaepernick protest thing, because I'm never gonna call it an anthem protest. There ain't nobody protesting that shitty little song with that crappy verse in it about slaves that you need to go read. We should have been protesting it, but nobody's protesting that. And white people who are pissed off, and their delusional black friends who are pissed off at black athletes and white allies protesting what they know to be police brutality and racism against unarmed black men, women, and children. They know that's what these protests have been about, but they have to make it about something other than the issue that they don't want to pay attention to.
Well, I mean, America has historically and presently been in a state of denial when it comes to us. Forever. I mean, there's never been, and that's the reason why that the racism persists in this country, because there has never been any serious attempt on the part of the society to really deal with its racism. And this was something that Thomas Jefferson lamented.
That's true.
I mean, Thomas Jefferson lamented that. That's why he supported heavily, not to give him any praise, but that's why he supported heavily to deport black people. He was one of the main people that argued that black freed blacks after slavery should be deported back to Africa because they will never be accepted here.
And I mean,
he just wanted to put his shape on it. But honestly, I think that that was something that that he seriously felt. I think that is something that really has some credence, because here we are hundreds of years later. And definitely a couple of hundred years after Jefferson's time. I mean, here we are still dealing with the basic issues of human rights when it comes to black people in this country. I think that Thomas Jefferson had his lamentations, as you would say,
right,
and his concerns had some validity. But let's look at it this way. I'm borrowing this from someone that I've heard on the radio say this the other day when it came to what kind of country we want. America is not a fixed construct. We can make this country, America's malleable, and we can make this country to whatever we want to make it to be. The fact of it is that there has to be enough will, forget the government, there has to be enough will amongst the people to decide that is the greatest country on earth just pure rhetoric? Or can we really make it that way? And we can really make it that way. And there has been people, past and present, who had pushed it inches towards being that so-called more perfect union. But it's not far enough. So I think that when it comes to and Kaepernick's going to have a big payday. He's going to win this. I believe Kaepernick is going to win this. These owners are going to have to pay him all this money. Now I'm gonna tell you something about rich people, because I've seen this on your post today. How rich people, you know, the way they spend money. When Kaepernick gets his payday, the owners, it's not going to come out their pocket. No, they're going to go to that slush fund they have, because I mean, Kaepernick's going to get millions of dollars, but that's pennies to them.
Right.
So they're preparing for the day that Kaepernick. Now he'll never play football again, but the thing of it is that he's going to get his payday, and I think that if we really want to stand with Kaepernick, you know, that was the thing, or kneel with Kaepernick or whatever. I think that black people, we have to be, and you said this, Jackie, we have to stop being scared of offending white people. You know, just to get to your point about the governor of Michigan being invited and Bill Clinton being invited to Aretha's funeral and stuff, goes back to what James Baldwin said. And I love this. James Baldwin made an observation about movies in Hollywood when there's black and white people, how black people are always sacrificing themselves for white people and all this other kind of stuff. And he made this observation, this point. He said, you know, these things are made, these movies are made, and the way these scenes are set up to assure white people that we don't hate them. And that stuff is still being played out right now. We invite the Bill Clintons and people that have shown no moral compass when it comes to how they treat our communities with giving us poison water and all of that. I mean, that they're invited to these venues. They, you know, we invite these people because there's something in us, and the black church is responsible for it, that we have to show them that we don't hate them and that we're such forgiving people. But there comes a time when you have to say, no, sit your ass home. We don't want you here.
That's right. That's right. And you know, if we are not going to stand up for justice for ourselves, I don't understand why we think anybody else is going to look at us and say, "Ooh, look at them. They're such a forgiving people. We're going to do right by them." That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
How many times John Lewis got beat in the head?
And thank the police officers for his.
So John Lewis got beat in the head. Other people people sacrificed their lives to change this racist system, and the racist system is still here. People sacrifice their lives. You don't have anything else to give that is more valuable than your life, and yet racism persists. So I mean, that's how entrenched it is.
And so, you know, either we are going to fight it with our whole being and change the laws, because we're not talking about changing people's hearts. And we're going to end on this note. This is the problem with the black church and this whole not speaking ill of the dead and honoring people's legacy, and this doll's kind of, you know, spookism that we throw around all over the place, trying to shame people into not telling the truth about awful people, is that we focus too much on changing people's hearts. That's what we're conditioned to do in the Christian faith, in the white supremacist interpretation of the Christian faith. We're so focused on, we've been taught to focus on changing people's hearts. But the true revolutionary message of Jesus Christ is, you challenge the corrupt system. You challenge the imperialist state. That's what Jesus did. He was a challenge to the state.
And you know what? It's funny that we say this. It's sad in a way that we say that, but this is the only thing oppressed people have. Black people aren't in the position, I should say, I won't say can't. Black people aren't in the position right now to have an armed struggle with this racist government and this racist society. We're not in the position for that. We're not in the position to economically control and stranglehold this society by using economic resources, because we don't have any. So when you have a people who are broke and powerless, as we are, economically powerless, militarily powerless. You know, ain't none of us looking to go into the Appalachians soon, like Castro and them went to the mountains and fight a guerrilla war. We're not built for that yet. And so what happens is that the only thing you have left is moral power. But moral power has to work with people, as Malcolm once said, that, you know, you can only appeal to people's consciousness if they have one. And we're talking about a system that's upheld by people who have
no moral compass. So let's stop acting like we're pretending, like we're protecting their morality, and it's about to storm. So hey, we are done for tonight, y'all. Thanks for joining us. We're going to try to get back on a Thursday night schedule.
Yeah, but it's going. Our new time's going to be 8 though.
I think the new time might be 8 o'clock Thursday night because look, we're middle aged and we need our sleep. Yep. So hey, if you like what you hear here in Luqman Nation, please support us either through Patreon, GoFundMe, or PayPal. You can find us on all of those platforms, searching for us under Luqman Nation, LuqManNation. Please like our page on Facebook, Coffee, Current Events, and Politics in Luqman Nation. Also like our companion page, now it'll be once a month history show, Brick by Brick on Luqman Nation.
Yep. It's coming back.
It's coming back. Pitbulls and Politics, his platform on Spreaker, will also be back on schedule. Also, check out our weekly segments on Loud and Clear with John Kiriakou, where we talk about midterm and primary races throughout the country. We have a great time every week during that.
Oh, and now we've also done a couple of Dr. Larry,
Dr. Wilmer, Leon's shows, right. The Critical Hour. Dr. Wilmer Leon, check us out sometimes on By Any Means Necessary
with Eugene Courier and Sean
A. Blackman.
Yep.
Check us out wherever we are. If you like what you see in Luqman Nation, please share our videos, invite friends to watch, and support us however you can. In the meantime, be really good to each other.
Yep.
Peace.
We don't have opening, but we got closing music. Kalimba time.
Closing music. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Do it. Good night, y'all.
We're going to be black to the end. Rest in peace, Maurice White.